So, John, I wanted to ask you, since you are an expert on the history, the Dene history of this region and the anti-colonial history of this region, what is the relationship between the history of resource extraction here and racism and discrimination against our relatives in Farmington?
Well, they both escalated during times of boom. Energy, first it was oil and gas and uranium in the 50s and 60s. And in the 70s through the early 80s, it was primarily coal, but there was a good level of oil and gas extraction and processing as well. In the 50s and 60s, Farmington grew from a town of 3,500 to 35,000. There's construction all over. We had to go to school half day, trailer parks all over the place, white trash from Oklahoma and Texas coming in, and the mistreatment, the Indian rolling, the brutality, the attitudes that they had and the actions that they employed escalated as well, and then it kind of peaked around 1973, 1974. It was a worsening situation. But I think that the uprising that we had, the people's response to the April 1974 killings, essentially put a stop to the escalation. It didn't put a stop to the hate crimes because they continued with the level there, because they had to reckon with us, great numbers of people who were outraged and angered by this, and the streets, we basically shut it down. And that was the boycott, kind of the boycott. It was a boycott effect that Chile was talking about. They were afraid of us, but they did have cops. They had SWAT squads. You had those boys in blue with the nightsticks, and the first couple of marches they did have snipers on the roofs. They was heavily militarized. But they knew that we weren't going to stop. They could try to intimidate us, but just the spirit of the people, and it was intergenerational. You saw those older women out there, the matriarchs leading men. You saw the young children there. It was broad-based, and everybody identified with the racism there, and a lot of them identified because they had family members and relatives killed also, or else and also missing, presumed killed. They knew that the hate culture here, and they knew that the hate crimes were outgrowths of a long, of an ingrained racism here that's a part of the white culture here. And all border towns, whether South Dakota, Gordon, Nebraska, Ajo, Arizona, Flagstaff, Gallup, here, Grants, these are, like I said, there's no such thing as an Indian-friendly border town. And just the fact that they sit on stolen Indian land, and then the land that they steal, they use for fracking and, other destructive oil and gas and uranium and coal extraction and processing. And then what they process, the waste and everything, they won't clean it up. So there's no accountability, there's no responsibility, really. So we just, they steal our land, and they do that land to us. And the toll that it's taking on our people and our culture and our religion and all of that is continuing, and actually worsening because it is continuing. Definitely the resource extraction, the level was commensurate with, was pretty much commensurate with the level of hate crimes here, and a lot of that came from the white oil field fresh in Texas and Oklahoma, where they lynch Indians. In fact, there are some blacks. Black friends I had that came up here that I befriended, and they escaped with their lives. They got on the bus and just went as far as they could. and a lot of them ended up here, escaping the lynching, which is another hate crime. So that's that's a white, hateful, racist culture of Farmington. And has progress been made? I don't know if you can call less racism. Is that progress? Is that a measurement of progress, or is just that a continuation, but at a low level of there? In any case, the Indian killings continue, and adding to the total sum, and the continuing sum of the casualties of the Indian wars. Now, that's unacceptable. Can't say that progress has been made. No.
So speaking of that, I listened to an interview you did for Native America Calling back in April of 2024, and the mayor of Farmington was also on that call. It was you, Dr. Jennifer Dale, Chili Yazzie, who were on that program, and the mayor did claim that things were better. He cited the graduation rate of Native people here in Farmington. And I was just doing an interview for High Country News, and I said, well, the white mayor of Farmington isn't the person who gets to decide what justice looks like. It's those who have been violated and aggrieved by genocide that get to decide what justice looks like. And so what does justice look like? What would it take for this type of violence against our relatives to end?
Well, I think that you're talking strategy. One strategy is healing and, undoing racism and that sort of thing. And one is, just duking it out, squaring off with the enemy. Kind of the way I dealt with racism when I was growing up. Some things that you just have to do. I'm not turn the other cheek or hug the enemy kind of guy. In those two cases, actually, or more, that put a stop to that. They knew that it was unacceptable to call me a savage and a fucking Navajo, and so and I think that we need to have that kind of spirit there, just like the spirit that Black Horse had. He said, no, they can't use our people for target practice, and that's enough. And so the mobilization, the 1,000 warriors that showed up here, and we're going to destroy this town. Now, what they ended up doing, the town didn't surrender the murderer. Well, there's actually a couple of murderers, but the one that started it, he ran into a cornfield, and Black Horse and his warriors, circled that cornfield and burned it. And all that was left was a crispy critter with his boots on. You could see his spurs there, but everything else was burnt there. That's how they they administered justice there, because border town justice don't exist either. Killing an Indian, an American Indian, not until 1924 was it a crime. They were killing Indians that were that were off the reservation. It was fair to do that. That's not a federal crime, major or otherwise. And this used to be a sundown town. You could trade here. If you got a pass from the local Indian agent, it was only good for day, but you had to be out by sunset. And if you're not, then you're fair game. They just kill you. And that hatred and that violence, still manifested, in the same way. It's physical, it's deadly, and it's unacceptable by the victims and by the resistors. But there are different ways of doing that. To think out the box, and as long as I think that you need to neutralize the enemy. You need to combat the racism in whatever way is effective, and whatever way you kind of present it to the people. And it's their decision. Although there will be groups that are more militant, and that's the group I would belong with. Just take them on. Like when I said, with the killings, if justice isn't forthcoming, like we knew, then there'll be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a life for a life. If 3 Navajo teenagers had killed 3 white men, they would have been given the electric chair. if not lynched first, they wouldn't have been they wouldn't have been sent to Springer. We know how border town justice works, the double standard to justice. I noticed there are a number of white people left, when I was talking in those terms. They'll never understand because they've never been, at the receiving end of racism. They would say, "Oh, yeah, I'm not racist. In fact, I'm part Indian myself," or something like that. That's a hell of a response. Totally unacceptable. But duking it out like we did over here, doing what you have to do, and direct confrontation. That's what Clyde Ballacourt was really into, the confrontation, the politics of confrontation. Also in the mean streets of Minnesota, Minneapolis, Franklin Street, the way the cops were there. It's the same thing in Oakland. Sometimes Black Panther Party for self-defense. That's armed self-defense. We got to protect our people. We got to protect our communities. I'm still of that kind of thinking in favor of that kind of action. I can't really do anything now, physically, but I can talk about what my response over the decades was. Encourage these young warriors, to act the same way, because I drew my inspiration from resistance warriors, now resistance warriors like Black Horse.
I'm going to ask you one more question. I know we've been talking for a long time. There are overlapping, and you've written a lot about this, there are overlapping histories of dispossession of Diné land on what is considered Eastern Navajo. Farmington, I think, would be considered part of that. Whether it's the checkerboarding, the coming in of the railroad, the way that resource extraction has just chipped away at the actual healthy, available land base for our people to practice our way of life. That we have done since time immemorial in this place. And like you said, this goes all the way back to the first coming of settlers and ranchers when Diné people were removed from certain parts of our customary homelands to make way for, white ranchers. And that there was conflict. There were Indian killings at that time too. You document all of this. And so what does racism and discrimination against our relatives in Farmington have to do with land? Whether it's our relationship with land, settler claims to land, the theft of land, and what would land back, which is what a lot of our movements today are talking about. Do you think land back, like actually land back to our people, do you think that would have some sort of impact on the kind of racism and discrimination, just the violence that our people continue to face in our own land? Because as it was said today, Farmington is our land, is Diné land. It never stopped being Diné land just because the U.S. came in with the cavalry or with settlers or their cattle. So what would land back what kind of impact would land back have, perhaps, on discrimination and racism against our relatives? And what does the history of land have to do with border town violence, and vice versa?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, there are, different thoughts. And one of them is, Farmington, all these border towns, that's enemy territory. That sort of implies that we surrendered that. It's not Indian land anymore. There's other thoughts that say, well, if we internally develop Indian reservations so we don't have to depend on border towns, we become self-sufficient, and there'll be less brutality against our people. The courts, Congress, the political legal stuff, I think we've already exhausted our domestic remedies there. There's some things we could do at the international level in hooking up with international liberation movements, national liberation movements around, because our situations are similar, and the enemy is much the same as well. And then there are others that say, Farmington should be a Navajo city. I've heard that in Gallup too, Navajo City. That we take it over. We have the numbers. And control the politics and economy, and that kind of thing. There was one CNL leader said 18 years ago that in 20 years, Farmington used to be a Navajo city. And it isn't. We have a city councilman on there who was appointed by the mayor, but still, whatever progress we make, there's always evokes a reaction. We filed redistricting lawsuit against San Juan County back in the late 70s. So they redistricted, and there were a couple other violations in the 1965 Voting Act that were corrected as well through litigation, and so we get two of our two Navajo members on, I don't know what they call the board of regents or whatever for San Juan College, and the white racists don't like that, and there are death threats against those two. This was in 1982, death threats, and the cowards, were never caught or anything, and there wasn't much, zealous effort to locate who they were. I think the FBI, poked around and stuff, and they end up investigating you. I've done that a couple of times. I point out the hate crimes, and they investigate me, for Christ's sake, and anything to avoid confronting the problem with with the hope of solving it or alleviating conditions. And then Wallace Charlie, he was also elected to San Juan County Commissioner as a result of the redistricting. Some old redneck, from downtown, he must be 80 years old. He went and attacked him, and it's clear, assault and battery, but he wasn't prosecuted. So you have that kind of this ugliness that that really defines all of our relations with the settler culture. We try to be nice. We try to do things the right, proper way, and it doesn't work. You go to federal Indian law, and really, dispossession is 9/10 of the law in our case. And land back, I think that it needs to be prioritized and made part of a agenda, along with just escalating efforts to free Leonard Peltier, and it's just a number of it never ends. But we're not going to give up. That land is ours. We still have spiritual title to it, and getting physical title or physical control. I don't know about ownership, but if we can, if we can live on the land that we were intended by the Creator, the point of our emergence and migration, settle. We're chosen by the Creator to come here and take care of this land, which we did for centuries after the Anasazis moved out to the middle Rio, to the Rio Grande River Valley. The Navajos lived here for centuries, but they honored those who came before us. And in that sense, it's always been Indian land. And this thing about controversies coming up, this is Navajo land, and saying that to our Pueblo allies on the fracking thing, Anasazis lived here, and then they migrated to west, Hopi, Zuni, Laguna, Acoma, and then in the Rio Grande Valley. But they weren't moved out like they weren't moved out by Navajos. We didn't come over and invade them or colonize them or relocate. The land was here. It was intended to be that way. So in a sense, it's holy land. So by being chosen by the Creator, for now in this period of history, chosen people, holy land, and that kind of thing. I always thought of writing something on that, but just kind of a thing that I paid some consideration to. Land back, that all the occupations in the late 60s and early 70s, Alcatraz and Fort Lewis and Camp Hesperus up here, we're taking control of the land there by occupation, and that land was not part of the United States. It was Indian land, like Wounded Knee, the liberation. That's Indian land. It's where you can be free. Just like the Pueblo Revolt, for 12 years. That was Pueblo land. There was absolute sovereignty. And that's what we want, and with the Taos Pueblo getting most of their Black Lake back, Blue Lake back, it took 70 years. It was intergenerational. But you keep fighting, you keep fighting. Same thing with Mount Adams and the Yakima. You keep fighting and you keep fighting, intergenerational. So, we got to have a long view and big picture kind of thing as we continue the struggle here. So.
That good? You're good? Is there anything else you would like to add, John?
No, I'm just glad to be honored, and I'm glad to be of assistance and help in a resource person kind of way to liberation groups like the Red Nation and Cat Info Shop, and and the young people. I think that's one of the reasons why I've lived this long, even though I'm falling apart, but my mind is still sort of there, and whatever I can do to aid and abet the righteousness of our movement, our continuing movement, then that's what I want to do. That's the way I want to go out.
Yeah, John.